Support for Consider This is provided by
There's a new place for senior care with daily laundry service. A place with a day spa. A place where seniors get the care they need in the comfort of home. Home Instead Senior Care.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
3 weeks before voters would decide the next president of the United States, John McCain, trailing in the polls, told a crowd of supporters Barack Obama was a good man.
I have to tell you, he is a decent person and a person that you do not have to be scared as President of the United States. Now,
Getting booed at your own town hall can't be easy. But John McCain plowed ahead, extolling the differences between debating an opponent and demeaning one.
He's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about.
The morning after, the man who would beat him thanked him.
I appreciated his reminder that we can disagree while still being respectful of each other.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, civil discourse. Here to talk more about it is Patrick McNamara. Dr. McNamara is Director of International Studies, the Schwab Center for Israel, Jewish Studies, and the Middle East, and faculty in the Political Science Department. Thank you for being here and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on, Kathy.
All right, Patrick, I want to start. How do you define civility?
Simply put, I would define civility as treating others with respect. Maybe another way of saying it is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Okay,
very good. And that opening video, give us some examples of what you saw there.
I thought that the exchange, you saw two presidential candidates locked in the heat of the campaign 3 weeks before election time, and both of them chose to treat the other with respect. First, you saw John McCain literally take the microphone from the woman accusing Barack Obama of being an Arab and correcting him, saying he's a decent man. I disagree with him, and that I think is a very important point. You can disagree with someone and still treat them with respect. Then you saw the next day Obama saying essentially the same thing. You know, I respect him. I don't maybe agree with all of his policies, but I still treat him with respect and kindness.
You watch something like that, Patrick, and you think, how hard can this be,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they made it look so natural, so something that we should all be working harder to try to accomplish. Why is this so tough for people to do that?
Well, I think that there has been a escalation of what's sometimes called tribalism in America. It's the us and them syndrome, us versus them. And how you define us is different in different pockets, but to be adamantly opposed to them and to make them lesser than you is, I think, part of what's gone on since 2008 when we had this campaign.
Wow. And so I think here would be interesting to note your background. How do you know so much about this topic?
Well, first of all, my background, both educationally and in terms of my practice, is conflict resolution. So I have been trained in and have done a lot of work in conflict resolution. I also have found myself in interfaith circles. I also have worked in the 90s into the early 2000s on interracial dialogues. Oh, wow. Here at UNO, I helped launch the Sustained Dialogue Initiative. And so we have a student group that is dialoguing with one another, trying to find ways across lines of difference to bring people together to new understandings.
So then the question becomes, Patrick, why this path for you? What is it about this particular topic that is of interest enough that you do it really all the time?
I guess if I'm being totally open and honest with you, just between you and me now.
Okay, all right.
I have a sense of calling. I had an experience of calling where it became clear to me what God's purpose was for my life, and I have tried to live that out. I have failed most days and many days, but in my walk, I have tried to be a peacemaker in the world. And that is, broadly speaking, I think civility is a theme in that peace building journey.
Okay, well, we're going to kind of break this down a little bit. We want to start with some guidelines, right? So we're going to put those up on the screen for our viewers as you kind of walk us through those, if you would, please.
Very good, very good. So I'm taking the first one, recognize a person's right to advocate ideas different from your own. This is that agreeing to disagree. You may, and hopefully you do, actually, it's more interesting when people differ, right? That diversity brings energy to the conversation. Second, show respect for others, right? We learn this in kindergarten, but we need to learn it again and again, it seems. Even in the midst of those differences, you still show respect for the other. Third, speak as you would like to be spoken to. This actually, I think, is a restatement of the golden rule that I talked about before, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? You are looking at how you want to be treated, and you are treating others in that way. Fourth, agree to listen. This is really hard, and I have to admit my own challenge in this. You're a great interviewer, you do this for a living, but for many of us, we are always jumping to, what am I going to say next? Instead of sitting back and truly listening to what the other person is saying in that moment. And fifth, speak for yourself, not others. It is a practice in dialogue to use I statements. When you are using I statements, or when you're talking about my experience has been, it is very hard to argue with that, because you can't say, no, that's not your experience. What do you mean? So that idea of speaking for yourself and not others is a good rule of thumb, using I statements.
Okay, so old habits hard to break for many of us, right? So we looked at the opening video, we thought, wow, I might be able to do that. We looked at these guidelines, doesn't look so tough. So square one, I mean, is this something that you practice? Is this something you need to be reminded? How do you start, Patrick, in wanting to turn the corner so that you can become, I think, what people really do hope to be?
Yeah, I would answer that two ways. One, in a personal way, and second, in a dialogue setting way.
Okay.
In a personal way, I believe that we project out the inner conflicts or the inner peace that we have within us. And if a person is really in turmoil in their own inner lives, it is really hard to engage with others in a peaceful, respectful, civil way, because you're projecting that anger out to others.
Right.
In a dialogue setting, it is often helpful to have a neutral facilitator, a third party, to come in and help others with their dialogue, so that you aren't just sitting in a room with someone that you're, but you are finding ways through a facilitator to dialogue with them in civil, respectful ways.
Okay, so you bring up a good point when you say that it starts from within. I think oftentimes, and I think we're all guilty of it, we want to make a change, and so I liken it maybe to running. We go out and we want to eventually run 5 miles, but we start up by trying to do that, and then we wind up being set back. I suppose the same would apply here. If someone's doing kind of a self-examination, where do they look first? I mean, obviously you have to be honest with yourself,
right?
But what types of things can I be doing in my own space without the mediator, without the other person in the room, so that I can position myself, well, like stretching, before you run. What can I be doing?
So I'm going to reference personal peace practices.
Okay.
By personal peace practices, I mean, what do you do when you're feeling that escalation of anger inside of you, what do you do to bring down that anger?
Okay.
Maybe it is literally take a breath. Maybe it's take a drink of water. Maybe you need to take some time and say, Kathy, I'm not ready to talk with you about this right now. Can we talk about it in 10 minutes, or can we talk about it tomorrow?
Okay.
Maybe there's something that you do. You referenced running. Maybe you're a runner. Maybe when you're feeling that, you go out for a long run, or a walk in nature, or meditation, prayer, some kind of a group that you are a part of. There are many ways. Talk to friends, talk to parents, whatever that is.
Right.
We have our personal peace practices that bring us into a place of centeredness.
Okay, and then you go and you sit across the table from someone and you start to have this conversation, and of course it's human nature that our opinion is the correct one,
Sure.
right? I mean, that's what we all think. So,
Sure.
so how do you find that balance of being able to express your own opinion but still understanding that you have your own viewpoint, and then we kind of have that exchange?
Yeah, I guess it's okay to disagree. In fact, in my classes here at UNO, I often say class is a lot more interesting when we disagree, when we have some energy in the room and mix it up. And I respect all viewpoints. I'm trying to create a space where everyone's viewpoint is welcomed in my classroom. And I think bringing our authentic selves to the table and being real, being transparent is important. When we are trying to hide or fearful about others' judgment all the time, and I'm not going to be honest with you because I don't know what you're going to think of me, and that leads to this kind of tension that you're talking about. How one does that? I mean, it's practice. Literally, it is practice. Great musicians don't wake up some morning and play the Bach cello suite. They have practiced for literally decades to get to that point. In the same way, I think those of us in the facilitator world have spent time training. I actually teach a class on facilitation here at UNO. And that, I think, is something that you can teach, but it's also something that you have maybe innately as well. There are some people who are more adept at facilitation than others. Some people probably have early childhood experiences which bring great turmoil to their lives, and it's hard when that's what you're dealing with inside to come and be, totally engaged and peaceful with someone who is different, has differing views than you, because your experience hasn't been that we can peacefully disagree. Your experience has been that whenever there is disagreement, it escalates into shouting or even violence. When that has been your experience, it is hard to come to the table with a new mindset.
Wow, your opportunities here, very, very interesting, because you just hit on something. Not only does the individual need to recognize and get to know him or herself better before coming to the table, but you need to know something about where they've been. You're kind of like a psychiatrist as well in digging deep to be able to say, where is this really rooted, and getting that person to trust you enough to open up. Talk a little bit about that process.
I think it's important to not confuse facilitation, or sometimes I do mediation, with therapy. That is not what we're doing.
Okay.
But you are right that you need, I call it an empathetic mindset, right? You have to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and be able to say, look, that has not been my experience, but I can understand how, coming from where you've come from, you have formed these ideas. My ideas differ than you. My experience differs from you. But given where you are, this is I understand.
Yeah, there's a saying, and I'm being reminded of it now: never let your emotions get ahead of your logic, right?
Nice.
And so I think so oftentimes we're in that moment and we act in that moment, and it's like, oh, we'll worry about the rest of it later. oftentimes it takes much longer to undo something that's been done in that dispute than it would to take a few steps back to say, okay, hold on a second.
Right.
Where is it? What path am I heading down here?
Exactly.
So talk about the importance of that.
How many times have all of us said, "Oh, I wish they could just take that back," right?
Yes.
We can't once it's out there. But here, and there's actually a lot of research about this, apology and forgiveness is one of the most important dynamics in conflict resolution. So, and I'm going to tie this back into civility in just a second, but that idea that I sincerely, first of all, acknowledge my wrongdoing, second of all, apologize for my wrongdoing, and then seek your forgiveness. If you do give me that forgiveness, that is a transformational moment. And I believe that in the civil dialogues that we would like to see more of in our country, that apology and forgiveness is a very difficult dynamic.
Yeah. And as we're in the middle of the dispute, right, when do you know, Patrick, that you've been defeated, I guess, for lack of a better, I mean, at some point in that argument, and you're right, arguing can be healthy if it's done correctly, right, or with, you know, thoughtfulness there. But when do you know you're defeated? And secondly, how do you accept that in a very gracious manner, right?
I think the first one is probably easier. It is probably pretty evident at some point that my logic has not held here, and I've tried to go down this road, but whatever they're telling me, you know, okay, I get it, right? The second piece is more difficult, and that is to accept that. And that is, I think, often wrapped up in our ego. And when we can bring our, when we can kind of get ourselves out of that ego, you know, this is what I'm all about, and my whole identity is about this. That, you know, if I can get out of that and be able to say, look, I was wrong. Okay, I get it. You know, or maybe, okay, I understand your argument, Kathy, and I think that you've made a good argument here, and I'm convinced on this point, but on this point, I'm still, you know, going to hold fast to what I believe in here, and here's why.
Okay.
So, you know, there can be give and take. That, I think, is one thing, and I'm going to refer back to John McCain, that he did so well in politics, right? He was a master negotiator, and often across the aisle. So he was a lifelong Republican, but able to work with the Democrats in a way that few Republicans are. And I think that, actually, interestingly, in Nebraska, we have some examples of those kinds of bipartisan politicians who aren't just locked in the party's view, but sometimes can work together. I think our state legislature, in some ways, is set up as a unicameral that is nonpartisan. Now, I understand that there are partisan politics that play out, but in the ideal form, our state government is, I think, a model for the country.
Yeah, and we've gotten so used to people going back and forth that there are folks who don't even want to get into that world because they're fearful, or there's a great reluctance. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about, and it may seem obvious, but the benefits in more people stepping up, like we saw in that opening video. We seem to have had such a great disconnect. How do we, Patrick, start to come together and give us some foresight in terms of what could it look like if more and more people did that?
Even the idea of a town hall meeting, which we saw, you know, John McCain holding there. Of course, those were his supporters, so it wasn't a town hall in the sense of let's get a bunch of people in the room, which I think would be more interesting. But those open mic opportunities are rare in politics, even 10 years on now, right? We have, you know, scripted events in which, you know, you've got a planted question here and you've got a planted question there, and, you know, everyone's been screened who's even coming into the room, so you're not going to get any dissent, and, you know, that kind of sterile atmosphere for dialogue is, I think, not leading to the kind of deeper dialogue, even disagreement at times, respectful disagreement. We just don't have forums for that as much anymore. I actually think that UNO, as a educational institution, can provide some of those fora for these types of civil discourses.
Yeah, and you've mentioned, we'll bring it full circle here, you've mentioned UNO. What's going on here on campus that is right along the lines of this topic?
Well, I'll refer back to the Sustained Dialogue initiative that's now being run out of Student Affairs. My friend Jesse Hitchens is leading that effort, and it's really a student-run organization. So there are opportunities for students to come together and dialogue about difficult issues. And there are also, I mean, we have Table Talk. Inclusive Communities sponsors that. Inclusive Communities is actually here. They have their offices here in our Community Engagement Center. So, you know, there is a campus tie-in there. Out of the Schwab Center, we have a Middle East forum once a month, issues of the Middle East, and that can get pretty hot, believe me. But I think that they are respectful and civil. When we create spaces where people can differ but still respect each other's views, and I think that that is what is needed and what UNO and other educational institutions can and should be playing in the world.
Absolutely. Citywide, what's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on here in Omaha? Talk about some other things outside of UNO.
Yeah. Well, there are some organizations I know that are trying to provide dialogue. I'm thinking of you sometimes have film streams, which has you know, a film and then some dialogue to follow, and that's always an interesting event. There are other venues. I think of, you know, Kaneko, which has some interesting events down there, and I love places where people come together across lines of difference, whether that's racial difference or age difference or religious difference or sexual orientation difference or whatever that is. When there are few public spaces in our city where people do come together across lines of difference. But when you see that mix, you look around and I think it energizes those of us in Omaha.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got, I don't know, about a minute and a half here. Final thoughts. What's the real takeaway if we've heard nothing else from you today? What is that final thought that we should have?
I'm going to end by going back to the idea of working on ourselves. Know thyself, and really starting with yourself, and then bringing that authentic person that you are to whatever it is that you're doing. We need more leaders like John McCain. I think that that ability to work across lines of difference, to listen to others, to negotiate with others, to even give up a little bit in that negotiation and come to some common ground, that is being lost more and more in our political leadership today. And I hope that in the future we'll have more people inspired by John McCain.
So I want you to tell our viewers, you say dig deep, starts with you. For that person who's watching saying, I don't know, how do you get them over the hurdle? How do you do that?
Well, I would ask, what do you do to calm yourself? What is your own personal peace practice? How do you deal with the sometimes turmoil inside? And then find ways to create more time, more space, more of that in your life. Maybe spend 10 minutes every morning in quiet time, and starting your day with some quiet time, some prayer, some reflective reading, maybe going for a run. Whatever it is that gets you in the mood for that day, I think can be a really important peace practice.
You're right, something that John McCain was definitely the master of.
Before I leave, I'd like to see our politics begin to return to the purposes and practices that distinguish our history from the history of other nations. I'd like to see us recover our sense that we are more alike than different. We're citizens of a republic made of shared ideals, forged in a new world to replace the tribal enmities that tormented the old one. Even in times of political turmoil such as these, we share that awesome heritage and the responsibility to embrace it. Whether we think each other right or wrong in our views on the issues of the day, we owe each other our respect, so long as our character merits respect, and as long as we share for all of our differences, for all the rancorous debates that enliven and sometimes demean our politics, a mutual devotion to the ideals our nation was conceived to uphold, that all are created equal, and liberty and equal justice are the natural rights of all.
More information on this program, of course, talking today about civil discourse, the National Institute for Civil Discourse, nicd.arizona.edu, or tolerance.org. Patrick McNamara here with us today talking about this topic. I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Very insightful, very much appreciated. I want to thank the students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course, all of our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at Mahoney State Park as seen through the lens of Ben Phillips, a senior right here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/Consider This. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
Support for Consider This is provided by
There's a new place for senior care, a place with flexible meal plans and 24-hour room service. A place where seniors get the care they need in the comfort of home. Home Instead Senior Care.